This is Sean Crystal. Catch the Inkpulp Podcast on Pharcyde TV Wednesdays at noon Pacific Time, 3 o'clock Eastern Time. Come hang. Peace. This is the Inkpulp Podcast. This is the Inkpulp Podcast. Comics, hip hop, life. Welcome to the Inkpulp Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Crystal. Today, you like that? I always start the episode up close and then I gotta ease into my chair. Oh, yeah. Welcome back. Today is going to be an art lesson. This is a 10-minute simple approach to drawing hands. Anyone who's drawn and attempted to draw hands knows the difficulty that comes with these things. I don't know why, but they're tricky. They're challenging. And I think it's important to have an approach. And like with all of my drawing, my approach is always based on simple shapes. So this is a quick introduction to my approach for drawing hands. And hands are really important because they emote so much. And when you're drawing comics or you're illustrating whatever, we can communicate a lot with hand language. So I wanted to give you all a taste of my teaching, a little more than what we've been doing, or something a little different than what we've been doing. This is an actual drawing demonstration, drawing lesson. So enjoy. This is free for you to take and learn from. If you like this sort of thing, click the link in my comments. Go to inkpulpinstruction.com where I offer a much more thorough learning experience with me and many of the top talent in the comic book industry. Sign up for a free lesson by giving your email, and you'll also get my bi-monthly newsletter. And I guess that's about it. Enjoy. Comment. Let me know what you think. Peace. Alright, today we're going to talk about drawing hands. Just a quick little simple approach that I think will help everyone. It's what I use and I find it very helpful, and all my students did when I taught it. I've got this fancy camera set up. I've got this fancy camera set up. And if I'm looking around, I'm just making sure everything's working good. So, hands are difficult. We know this. One of the trickiest things to draw are hands. They're challenging. But this helps. Let's look at my hand real quick. Alright, I like to think of the hand in a few different masses. Remember, simple shapes are the key to everything. So we've got this mass right here where the metacarpals are. You've got your digits coming off of there. Flip the hand over, you've got this mass here and this mass here. And if we can remember those simple masses, we'll be good to go. So the first thing I like to think of is when drawing a hand, if we think of the metacarpal area almost as a square to start with, okay, it's a good place to start. Now, this is one of the most important factors when drawing the hands, is to understand the order of the knuckles. So they come to a peak at your middle knuckle and fall off from there. So let's look at my hand. Here's your peak falling down, peak falling down. And then your digits fall off of there. And I like to think of fingers as not perfectly straight. I think it's important that your fingers, when you're drawing them, especially in the early stages of the drawing, that you don't let the bones restrict you too much. You'll end up with a very stiff looking hand, but that's later. Let's keep it simple for now. I like to, when drawing the initial forms of the hand, kind of indicate the tips of everything. Okay, so this would be the top of the hand. And then of course your wrist would fall off of there. Okay, now we're dealing with simple shapes now. I'm not getting to too much anatomy yet. We will get there. So let's flip that hand over. I'll draw a little bigger this time. Okay, same idea. Start with a simple little square, rectangle-ish form, and depending on which hand, you'll have your peak. But now this, what we're doing here is, let me back up there. This is something to consider, and I should talk about it. I like to keep the peak within that shape, so we don't end up with metacarpals that are too long. Okay, now we're looking at the same hand flipped over. So here you see the peak in that middle finger, and that's what that'll be. And your digits can fall off of that for sure, just like they did in the other drawing. Digits, of course, are your fingers. And here's the underside of your wrist. Okay, so now what really helps when doing the underside of the hand is to understand these masses in here. Okay, and you can always add meat, and looking at it now I can see these fingers are too short. That's a little better. So understanding these masses, then it's about fleshing out the fingers. And so when I'm fleshing out the fingers, I like to exaggerate this shape a bit where they're fatter up top, and that's more of a stylistic choice. But what I'm getting at here is, don't connect the fingers like that. Your fingers, there's webbing, flesh between them. Okay, here. So, you know, my hands are very tightly built, but the finger, if we were to draw a straight line, comes down to here and you have this webbing. And the same thing goes on the upper view. Okay, so those are some general ideas on building the hands. Now that of course is looking straight up or straight down at it. There's no perspective in mind. So the next thing to consider is, in a three-dimensional space, your hand. So I think of that rectangle again. But this time placing it in perspective. And I like to give some bend to it. I think when it comes to anatomy, it's a really great idea to give bend where things appear straight, and I think it helps accentuate movement in drawing and rhythm, which is important. So if this is the metacarpal area that we're seeing here, okay, and what we want to do here is, this is coming towards me, I'm going to again think about those knuckles. Okay, and if we imagine these little slots where the digits would come out from, and this is a bit of an exaggerated shape. I think it's great to teach with exaggerated shapes because it's easier to see the point without the subtleties. And you can, of course, add subtleties wherever you want. So generally speaking, we'd have these three-dimensional forms here coming out from the hand. And then of course you could follow this bone along the path, and you could knock in your metacarpals, which are always helpful. Okay, so if we come down to here, it's important that you understand the metacarpals kind of connect towards the middle of the condyle of the wrist. So another thing is, let's isolate this knuckle real quick. So the knuckle you can start to think of as a three-dimensional form as well, in perspective. So those knuckles rising off, and this is a shape that I use. I mean, if you study the work of a bunch of artists, you're going to see a bunch of different takes on that. So that's sort of the knuckle shape I'm talking about. So here, if we were to apply that shape there, and thanks to the magic of the Blackwing pencil, that's what your finger would look like. And as I'm finessing the shape, this is where it becomes a much more in-depth idea of anatomy, and that's another lesson. We're dealing with simple shapes here. You can always think about where these things are occurring. These like wrinkly circle areas. That's not an actual term, but for today's lesson it will do. Okay, so that's the idea of that. So in perspective, let's recap that shape, because that's a really, I mean, if we just talk about simple perspective, 2-point perspective, I don't want to get into a massive perspective lesson, but you understand that all of these are moving to a vanishing point over there, and all of these lines are converging to a vanishing point over here. You have your perspective. And then remember, I like to flex that a bit, give it a little bounce, a little rhythm. Okay, and that's just a very simple introduction to breaking down the shapes of the hand into manageable forms. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Hope you learned something. Check out inkpulpinstruction.com in the links, and I'll see you next time. Peace. This is the Inkpulp Podcast. This is the Inkpulp Podcast. Comics, hip hop, life.